News Talk, 95.1 FM and 790 AM. We are KFYO Mornings. Dave King, Matt Martin. And, as promised, Congressman Jodey Arrington on the phone this morning. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, Dave. Good morning, Matt. Good
morning.
to be with you guys, and it was great to spend a week running around the district and just always energized by being back home.
Oh, you're back in Lubbock today?
No, this last week I'm back here. We're in session today and tomorrow, but I was in the district all last week and started in Abilene at a farm expo, talking to our cotton growers out there, among others, and very excited about the cotton fix. And then lots of tax reform discussions and even a tax reform event where we're showing how it's playing out in our local economy with wages going up and expanded operations, more job opportunities. It's all very good.
So, Congressman, apparently the cotton fix going through with the budget, that apparently has made people pretty happy as far as the farm bill. It sounds like the farm bill, just from what I've heard, is going to go through much easier now.
That is exactly right, because we needed that cotton fix, and the agriculture side was extremely supportive. But, the food stamp program desperately needs reform. We need to get people from welfare to work. We need work requirements for able-bodied adults. And I can just tell you that it would have been a lot harder to reform that program, which I think is going to be the most controversial of the items in the Farm Bill. And it would have been much harder had we had to fix cotton inside the Farm Bill. The other piece of it, though, Matt, is that fixing it the way we did and when we did, it covers cotton as a seed and a lint for the first time ever, and it will apply to this year's crop. If we'd have done it in the Farm Bill, we'd have waited an entire year before it goes into effect. So it's just a win-win across the board.
Okay. Congressman, you talked about the changing of this food stamp program. What are they looking at doing to fix that program right now?
Well, the big piece of it is we've seen the food stamp program increase 50% during the Obama administration. They granted waivers for able-bodied people not to work. We need to have a law that requires anyone, and quite frankly, I feel this way about Medicaid and any other government service. Look, if you're not paying taxes and you're getting a tremendous amount of support from the federal government, you at a minimum, if you're an able-bodied person, need to be working or training for your next job, and that's going to be the big piece of it. But there are other components to it. Some are talking about drug testing, giving states more of the authority to administer it so you have less waste, fraud, and abuse. But the big piece is if you're able, you should work. It's good for you. It's good for our economy that now has 6 million surplus jobs. We need the labor. And in the end, it's the right thing to do for, on behalf of the taxpayers as a fiduciary.
Is there anyone talking about drastically changing the things that people can buy? For example, your candy, Coke, stuff like that, kind of your stuff like that, taking that out of what they can buy with that money?
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. That would be another one, including the drug testing, is, this is called the Supplemental Nutrition Program, and there's nothing nutritious about Cokes and candy. The food stamp folks, recipients, can't purchase beer and cigarettes, so I don't know why we would allow them to purchase things that aren't nutritional, especially with the obesity epidemic. And so that is a discussion. I will tell you there's some reasonable arguments on the other side about the federal government being the food police. And, there's lots of sugar in orange juice, and so where do you stop? And those are reasonable, and I think they're legitimate. But with the technology we have today, with the barcodes on every item, I think there's a way to do this. At a minimum, we should allow states the ability to do that, and then we should let them keep some of the savings as an incentive, and then just prove out that you can, in fact, do this. So I think we're going to make headway there, but I feel the same way I think you feel about it just from listening to your question. So, that's another issue.
Well, Congressman, I don't know if this was serious or what, but I had heard that Donald Trump is talking about or floating the idea of like sending boxed foods that you'd have to cook. It's something called Blue Apron that had never heard of. Is that any truth to that story? Instead, in other words, replacing food stamps with boxed food that people would have to prepare.
Yes, that is part of one of their initiatives that they're floating. I think there are a lot of details that need to be fleshed out. But remember this, the food stamp program used to be a commodity based. So we had surplus commodities, and those were the things that we transferred to folks who were the neediest among us. Now we've got a debit card where you can go and buy a bunch of Snickers, Cokes, among other things, and there's some good food that comes with that. But this is a way you can control the nutritional aspect. And some folks think that you can save money by purchasing these raw goods, in an economy of scale, so to speak. So I think it's worth looking at. I really do. I mean, that's the way we used to do it. It may not be as efficient as they think. So I'm just open to hearing more about it.
Okay. Congressman, we're going to go ahead and take the break. When we get back,
Sure.
We want to talk a little bit about what went on in Florida and what Congress is talking about doing because of that.
You got it.
All right. We'll be back right after the break.
News Talk, 95.1 FM and 790 AM. This is KFYO Mornings. Dave King, Matt Martin, right here, and we're back on the phone with Congressman Jodey Arrington this morning.
Congressman, have you heard? I know that Donald Trump had talked about, or President Trump had talked about a few things here and there of what he wants to do in response to this. But have you heard anybody else talking about it on the Republican side of things?
Well, I'm about to release my op-ed that will begin the discussion from at least my perspective. But here's just my thoughts, because I want your listeners, my constituents, fellow West Texans, to know where I am on it. I'd say that the key objective here is to protect our citizens against these folks who are mentally unstable or are criminally violent people, while protecting their Second Amendment right to defend themselves against violent governments, or bad governments. And that was the whole thrust. I think this is lost on some folks. It wasn't our tradition of hunting that gave us the Second Amendment. It wasn't even our natural right of self-defense. It was the ability for the American people to, as a citizenry, be armed to protect itself against a rogue regime. That is why we have the Second Amendment. So we have laws in place. We have good, reasonable restrictions on access to guns from folks who are mentally unstable or have a felony charge, and that's appropriate. What broke down in the Florida shooting and in the Texas shooting, quite frankly, was government's failure to identify, track, and respond to these threats before they became tragedies. That's the biggest breakdown. So I'm not saying there aren't things we can do. I just think we need to focus on that piece, and then the second piece that I think is equally important, and that is, look, if somebody is hell-bent on destruction and carrying out their murderous intent, they're not going to stop at a gun-free zone, okay? They're not going to respect our laws. So the last line of defense is for our citizens, and in this case, teachers and coaches who are licensed and trained to carry to protect our communities and protect our students. And I think that's appropriate because, again, at the end of the day, if they get through all the other traps, then the last line of defense is for these guys to be able to protect our kids. I think that local school districts, not the federal government, ought to be able to do whatever they deem necessary to put in these security measures. So those are the things I'm focused on.
Okay, so as far as that's concerned, let me ask you this. So we're looking, in my opinion, I think that anybody with a concealed carry should be able to carry on a campus. But I know that a lot of people don't agree with that. Is that what you're kind of looking at? Or are you just looking at people who the school district deems as being safe to carry a gun?
Well, I'm a big local. I'm a Second Amendment guy, but I'm a constitutional guy. But I'm also, that means I'm a states' rights and local control person. So I think the school district ought to be able to decide how they want to implement the sort of license to carry firearms on account of administrators and teachers. But yeah, I think that's their constitutional right. And I think some are already doing it, but I think in other instances, in other districts and towns and cities mainly, you're getting resistance. But that to me, again, is the last line of defense. And if that doesn't exist, then I think we've got a real problem, and we won't be able to mitigate against these things because it takes too long for law enforcement to engage.
Well, and but my question with that would be, what about these very liberal school districts who are going to decide not to have guns on their campus, and then they're going to blame guns whenever they get shot up? I mean...
Yeah, again, I think the state of Texas, I'm confident, will do what's right in that regard, and I think the school districts will do what they think is good with the input of their parents. I want to be careful not doing a one-size-fits-all sort of federal thing, but yeah, I think the federal government should secure that Second Amendment right, and I think the state and local school districts can decide how they want to do this with respect to their high school and junior high and elementary school campuses. But there's clearly a gaping hole in terms of their preparedness, and I think that's a big piece of this deal.
So one of the things that had been talked about by President Trump is that he wants to kind of fix the background check. Is there anything that needs to be fixed about the background check that's in place right now? And how can we get those that need to be on the list on the list?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One is when we passed out of the House the reciprocity legislation that basically said if you have the right if you're licensed rather to carry, you can carry across state lines. I think that's good legislation. Within that, though, we had a couple of things. One was a fix to the National Instant Background Check System that was going to enhance that process by holding agencies accountable for participating in it. You know, that was a big breakdown in the Texas shooting. And then providing some support for states to make sure that we shore up theirs. I think that's appropriate. I mean, we either believe we need to know who shouldn't have guns or we don't. I believe we do. So let's make sure it works. Maybe there's some other things that need to be looked at in that. We passed it. The Senate sat on it. And but I think it's going to be taken up. Again, I think that's appropriate to look at. I don't think it's appropriate to start putting more restrictions on gun ownership and possessing firearms because of the Second Amendment, in my view.
Yeah. Congressman, we've got about a minute left. What's in place right now to make sure that the government's, like sheriff's departments, police departments, are actually putting names on this list? Is there anything that forces them to do that right now?
Well, the national background check system should be doing that, but again, if there are gaps, these are the things we're going to be looking at, Matt, is where are the holes in this? Are we, in fact, not getting as much information as we should be getting from states or from local jurisdictions like sheriffs and police departments? So if there are holes, we got to fix them, and that was part of the NICS fix that we had in the reciprocity legislation. Okay. But again, if somebody...
Yeah. We are out of time. We're up against the clock, and we certainly do thank you for calling this morning. It's been very informative.
Thank you, guys. Hey, appreciate the opportunity.
Have a great day. All right. It's 7:59. That's Congressman Jodey Arrington.